welcome everyone. I am Patricia Dubroff with Assisting Hands Home Care. And today's book chat is going to be with Nicole Burton, who has written several books. And we're going to focus on one of them in particular, a memoir about finding her her birth parents after finding out that she was adopted. And we're going to spend about a half an hour together learning and contemplating how this affects our lives, and also asking her some meaningful questions about how you then turn a memoir into a play, because she is quite a playwright and has performed, and her plays have been performed around the DC area and beyond. And we love her for that creativity. So just so you know, we're going to welcome everybody and share another slide. I love this slide. That's my mom and dad at their wedding in 1947. My mom didn't have a white dress. She had a green suit, and they were young. And I like to show this picture because in our line of business at Assisting Hands, we provide meaningful caregiving support to our families, both in Montgomery County and Fairfax County. And it's because we love our families, literally all of our families. And when a client comes in and we start working with them, we become very, very close with all of them, and our caregivers do as well. And that's what makes it so special to me. You know, I've been in the field of arts and healing for over 35 years, and coming into home care, I was a little worried it might be too, I don't know, separate from the families. But actually, I find it's actually almost more deeply involved, because you really get to know siblings and parents and children and all that. So if you know somebody who needs help, or if you have questions about home care, you get to call me. It's so easy. And I'm not going to say a whole lot more about that unless somebody has a particular question. So I want to talk about our special guest today, and that is Nicole Burton. So Nicole has written over 20 plays, including Mr. Bisou's Lunch, Frida and Fred, Singlish, and her memoir, Swimming Up the Sun, is also a play. And that's actually the first time I heard that story was as a play. Then I subsequently read the book. So she's also written a show called Singlish about a woman whose husband is going through Alzheimer's, and we're going to let her talk about that a little bit. And then her new one, which I'm really excited about, is about a civil rights movement from 1964. Now, Pipeline Playwrights are 5 women playwrights who produce Zoom productions at this point, but they had been doing live productions pre-COVID. And it's a powerful group of, they're not fly-by-nights. These are serious playwrights. You may not have heard of them yet, but you should. And they're writing some really great stuff about our current conditions, about old things, new things. And so Nicole can talk to us a little bit about that too. So I'm going to leave Nicole's contact info up for a little bit so everybody can see that. And then I'll go back to the other slide to explain more about her book. So welcome, Nicole.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here. It's lovely to see you.
It's great. It's just great. So I wanted to talk to you first about the inspiration for being a playwright. Like how did writing ever fall into your lap? What was it that was that moment? Because we have some educators on this call, and I know it would be fun to know sort of, was there a moment or was there a process?
Yes, there was. I was in elementary school, so I became a writer quite young. I had written a story, and I was born and raised in England, but my family had lived in America. When I was a baby and just a toddler, we'd lived in America. My father's work with the Royal Air Force brought them here to Washington, actually, to the Pentagon. And so the idea of America was not a strange idea to me. And I wrote this story about how America had been created from the eruption of a volcano. I don't know where I got the idea from, but I got all this positive feedback from my teachers. And I thought, oh, writing stories leads to good things. And then while I was at that same school, I had an experience where I was censored. You wrote home, it was a boarding school, and you wrote home to your parents every week, but you didn't have any stamps. And of course, you weren't allowed to leave campus. So all your letters had to be read by the front office, and then they were stamped, and then they went out. And I said something in one of my letters that somebody had stolen my pen and pencil case that they didn't approve of. And they told me I had to rewrite my letter. And if I didn't rewrite my letter, I wouldn't be allowed to go home at the next time that you could go home.
Wow.
Yeah. So even at whatever age I was there, I would say about 9, 10, I said to myself, when I'm grown, I'm going to write exactly what I want to write. And so I have.
Yes, you have. Yes, you have indeed. So let's talk a little bit now about Swimming Up the Sun. What happened in your life to bring this story to the top?
I was adopted. That's the first thing that happened. Actually, the first thing that happened was that I was relinquished by my mother into close adoption. And I always knew about it. And I always, from the youngest age, wanted to find and know my biological kin. I had what I call a homing instinct. And I knew quite a bit, unlike most adoptees, I knew quite a bit about my birth parents, that my father was a Jewish businessman. My mother was not Jewish, she was an artist. And the fact that he was Jewish and she was not was the reason that they couldn't marry. And that I had been born in Nottingham, which is where they also lived. So I grew up with a profound interest in knowing who these people are. But there are a lot of barriers. For one thing, adoption is secret and all the records are sealed. I never had an original birth certificate. I had some information on an adoption order, but most birth certificates, and this is true in America as well, that the adoptee's birth certificate has the name of the adopted parents on it, not your biological parents, and also other information that relates to your adopted family. But I always wanted to know, so I began searching, and as luck would have it, the British opened up access to adult adoptees to the original birth certificates 45 years ago, just about the time that I was really wanting to activate my search. And so I was able to get my birth certificate. I had to go back to England, of course, and go through, there was a procedure. And I started searching, and it took 7 years, a couple of visits. This is before the internet. So if you wanted to look at documents, you had to actually go to where the documents were. And I had another stroke of good luck. My mother had some information, my adopted mother, that she had never told me, which was my father's last name. Very difficult to find anybody if you don't have their last name. And so she helped me. My adopted mother helped me find my birth father, and he helped me find my birth mother. And from there, I eventually met my 6 siblings, 3 on one side, 3 on another. and established relationships with them and my birth parents. And then, of course, cousins, step parents, and so on. And so I've been in reunion now for 37 years. And it's the greatest reunion is the greatest thing that's ever happened to me in my life.
That's a fabulous story. And I have to say that she hasn't given away any of the little sweet details. So you really should read the story. And better yet, it sounds like the play is going to be performed some point soon.
Yes. We're looking at Pipeline Playwrights. We're producing, we support Playwrights, but we also produce our work. And we're producing on Zoom this year and the first part of next year, just because it's not quite time to rally everybody into a theater, which is quite a high risk endeavor.
Yes.
And so when everybody feels comfortable again, we'll produce in person. And this play, I want the play of Swimming Up the Sun. I didn't want to do it on Zoom. I want to do it in person. So probably towards the end of next year or the beginning of 23, it will be
23.
Well, no, 23 actually.
Right, 23. I know. My whole years are off. I can't.
It will be produced.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful news. It's a beautiful play. I've only seen a staged reading, but even with that, it was just really, I don't know. I can see why you'd want to do it live. There's just something about it that would make sense to me too. So let's see if there's any questions from our lovely audience. I see we're an all-girl world here, a wise women world here. So you're happy to take yourself off mute and ask question. And then if there's not any questions, well, let's see. Marcia, go ahead.
Hi, this is kind of on a personal level. My younger son is adopted, and he comes with a lot of baggage. It's very possible his birth mom was on some kind of drugs, and there's more that he doesn't know about. And we would love for him to go through and find out more about his birth parents and his history. But he is so angry at his birth parents, or at least his birth mom. We have no idea who his birth dad was. But he is so angry at his birth mom that he doesn't want to do it. He won't even take one of the DNA tests. I mean, he won't do anything. And I was just wondering if when you started your search, you were angry at them giving you up, or if you understood why. I mean, he's known he's adopted since the day he was born. We have the birth story, and it took us 11 years to find him. So we were overjoyed with him. It's been quite a journey with him, but I'm just wondering if you went through any of those issues to decide to look for your birth parents.
Thank you, Marcia. Sweet of you to share that with us.
Thank you. That's an excellent question. Let me just ask you a couple of things. Was your son 11 when you adopted him?
No, we took him home from the hospital.
Okay.
My older son is almost 11 years older than he is.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And your son now is how old?
26, going on about 16.
Okay. I was 27 when I found my birth parents. And what state was he born in?
Maryland.
In Maryland. Okay. Because the information that you're able to get depends upon what state you were born in.
Right. And at one point he was going to, this was several years ago, he was going to meet with the adoption agency to get more information, but he at the last moment decided he couldn't handle it. So he canceled the appointment. Literally, it was at the last moment, like 15 minutes before the meeting.
You know, I will say this, that I wouldn't say that I was angry before I searched. The anger came later for me. But everybody has a different response to it. And being relinquished and adopted is traumatic. There's just no way around that. I'm not really hugely in favor of adoption for that reason. And it's traumatic for our birth mothers as well, because often they're told things that aren't true about how it will all go. You know, you'll forget about this child, you'll have other children. And of course, all birth mothers say exactly the same thing that my birth mother said to me the day I met her, which is, I thought about you every day of my life. How could I not? You know,
That's
because
sweet.
if you're a mother, you kind of know where that comes from. So
There are, I remember when we did a big program about this a few years back at Iona Senior Services, and we showed the movie about older adoptees trying to find their birth parents. And at that point, it was so late in everybody's lives that a lot of those folks had passed. So that was even more challenging. But you know, you had so many resources. If there's any resources you'd like to put in chat, that would be great. And I just wanted to see if there were other questions as well.
I will do that.
Jan, you want to?
Yeah. No, it's a really interesting story, and I am interested in this. I'm not adopted or have adopted children, but I'm just interested in why you wanted to find your birth parents, because a lot of people who are adopted never want to. You know, they're very happy with the family that they've been adopted into. But is it because you want to find where, you know, your appearance came from? You know, do you look like your mother or your father, or, you know, do you want to know if there are other siblings out there? Or I just don't understand why people go in search of their biological parents when probably you had a lovely family that you grew up with and you were happy with that. So what drove you? What drove you to want to go and find your birth parents?
All of the above. All of the above. I did not look the least bit like my adopted family. I have olive skin, they called it swarthy growing up. And it turns out that my father is a dark-skinned Jew. So that's where I get my complexion. And I desperately wanted to see most adoptees, whether they tell what we call earth people, non-adopted people or not, desperately want to see someone who looks like them. And I wanted to know who they were. You know, if was my mother an artist, you know, because I'm artsy, and my adopted mother was very artsy. So I wanted to know what connection we had on that basis. I wanted to know what it meant to be Jewish. I had no idea, except that I was a Jew. I had no idea what being Jewish meant, except from what people said to me. You know, there was some anti-Semitism in England. And so I wanted to know all these things. And I'll say this, for us adoptees, the idea of having multiple families is normal. You know, I always knew that I had biological kin and I had an adopted family whom I do love very much. For us, it's not either or, and it's not confusing and it's not strange because we're used to it. We've always had that if we were told we were adopted, we've always had that reality of these different families. So it's perfectly possible to have a beautiful reunion with your biological kin and still have a lovely relationship with your adopted family. It's different. It's different, and it's a little bit like a blend family, where if, say, there's a divorce and then the mother marries another man and he's got 2 kids and maybe there's some grandchildren, you just make the circle a little wider. Sometimes there are some logistical problems, like we just can't fit any more people at the table. But beyond logistics, there's always room for more love.
So it's Eleanor, I'm going to let you pop in there. Just, no, you got to unmute first.
Yes.
There you go.
Hello, Nicole. It's good to meet you. I'm wondering about the artistic process of turning your story into something for public consumption, and wondering to what extent you changed details, left things out of sensitivity for other people, made something slightly different for artistic, dramatic purposes, and that kind of thing. How did you transform your own story into something for other people?
That's another great question. I changed all the names on my birth mother's side in the book, and then that carried over to the play as well, because she didn't want to be found, and it took her many years to come out of the closet as a birth mother. She was very ashamed and traumatized by the experience. So I changed all the names. On my birth father's side, they had no such sensitivity. And once my father got over the surprise that, yes, I was his daughter, and oops, he had forgotten that he had fathered me, he was perfectly happy to be open and to introduce me to his wife and his kids and the rest of the family. So I didn't bother to change their names. For the most part, other than that, I hewed to what happened. Of course, you always edit and leave things out for the sake of a good narrative. But I believe that I didn't leave anything out that was key to telling the story, to crafting the story. And when I adapted the book to the stage, oh my goodness, I had only done some small adaptations before that, and I didn't really know how difficult it would be. That I thought I had gone very emotionally deep in the book, but for a play, you have to go 100 times deeper. And that was a shock. And of course, I had to leave out a lot of detail and granularity from the book, as you do when you create a play or a film, because what's in the narrative needs to track the story clearly. You can't go off on too many digressions. So there are a few stories that are in the book that are not in the play.
I wanted to say these are great stories and questions, and nobody understands anybody's story like that person does. That's what's so fascinating about this too. And I'd like to talk a little bit about another book that Nicole has written, if it's okay with you, Nicole,
Sure.
to talk about Adamson, because this book is a really joyful story, kind of like Forrest Gump, in the sense that this kid is everywhere you're supposed to be in the 60s, right? It's like
Right.
this. So tell a little bit about that one too. I'm going to put on this other slide so people can see these other books.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So Adamson's 1969 is a novel. And I decided I wanted to write it because, well, my husband, Jim Landry, was a few years, he's 7 years older than I am. He was a real child of the 60s. I just got the tail end of it. I had an older brother, so that gave me access to activities that influences that I might not have had for my age group. But my husband, Jim, was really into the 60s as a musician, as an artist. He was an anti-war activist. He was a civil rights activist. And so I was interested in that domain. And then my family emigrated to the United States in the late 60s. So the experience of coming to America was very vivid for me. I'd gone through that. And nowadays, Britain is not so terribly different from America culturally. But back in the 60s, we were much more different countries. And it was much more like coming to an alien planet than it was, than it would be nowadays. And I was also influenced by my brother's story, the brother that I grew up with, because he came to the United States with us, and he was just finishing high school and then would be going into college. And we thought we would move here and kind of live here happily ever after. But my father's job moved us back to Europe, to Italy, 8 months after we arrived. And so my brother ended up getting separated from the family and staying in the United States because he'd already applied for college. He was finishing up high school. The English systems are different. He couldn't go back to England and just join his cohort. He would have had to redo the entire year. There wasn't anything for him in Italy. So he stayed here, and I wondered what on earth, I mean, I knew his story, but I wanted to do a fictional telling of what that might have been like for a young man of that age to find himself completely bereft of biological kin or any other kin for that matter in the United States during what turned out to be an extremely eventful year. All kinds of things happened in 1969. So it was rather fun to have Adamson, the main character, encounter these different events and personalities as he goes through the year, while he is working out who he is and who his family of choice would be and what he would do with his life.
Okay, well, we're going to leave that as a cliffhanger because we're getting close to time. It goes so fast, darn. And I wanted to also ask you, it's a really fun read and I recommend it highly. But I'd love to know about who this little known women's civil rights project is from 1964, going back to that same era. Ah, she's got it. Wednesdays in Mississippi.
So Wednesdays in Mississippi is a real life story of a women's civil rights project that began in 1964, Freedom Summer 1964, sponsored by Dorothy Height and the National Council of Negro Women, in which teams of interracial teams of women of influence from the North went down for short visits to Mississippi during that summer with the purpose of witnessing the freedom schools and the voter registration efforts and meeting with local women to help build bridges of understanding and communication.
Ah, so, you know, I think
the biggest civil rights story you've never heard of.
Well, you know, there was a group from the Bannockburn community in Bethesda. You might want to check with their historians, because I believe there was a group of women who were part of that sojourn.
Okay.
And that would give you maybe some local folks. I know 2 of them that I knew were in it have passed just recently, within the past couple of years. But I remember hearing those stories. And, Bannockburn was a very activist neighborhood,
Progressive
very
neighborhood.
progressive. Yeah. And it was built, as a community like that. I mean, it was, intentionally done like that. So this is exciting. So you've got a new play coming out. You've got books to be read. Anything else you'd like to share with us about, inspiring things from a playwright in the 21st, second century? What the heck century we're in?
I would encourage you to go to pipelineplaywrights.org if you'd like to get on our mailing list. We are doing plays on Zoom. And in fact, we have an event tonight where we're spotlighting, these are readings of 3 high school young women playwrights. And they're going to be reading their short plays on Zoom tonight. And then we have, at least once a month, play readings and our first Zoom production coming up. So I'm happy to add you to our mailing list. We don't spam. It's not frequent emails. So I would love for you to join our audience and come and see what we're doing. We're 5 women playwrights, and we produce and promote and support each other's playwriting work. And the other thing I would just like to say, going back to Swimming Up the Sun, and that is that on the subject of adoption, I really encourage people who say, well, what can I do to help? Because most people in the United States, adoptees, they don't have access to their original birth certificates. In the United States, most adoptees, 9 million of us, are sort of second-class citizens. And so what people can do is they can become allies, and they can ask their state representatives and senators and say, why does my state not allow adult adoptees to get access to their original birth certificate like I can? And to encourage them to change the legislation in the state. It has to go state by state. And there are only 8 states that allow untrammeled access. There are a few other states that allow some access, but it's modulated. So most adult adoptees, including Maryland, Virginia, and DC, do not have access. And that in 2021, that's unbelievable, especially since in England they opened the records 45 years ago and nothing bad has happened.
Yeah, I think you're onto something. Well, that's good. So it's given us all some homework. I thank you so much, Nicole, for being here and sharing your stories. They're beautiful stories. Anytime you can get in the room with one of Nicole's stories, it's a bonus. I also want to point out that Eleanor is here as a friend, but also because she has been with the F. Scott Fitzgerald Festival for many, many years and has coerced me into being on the committee, and I'm loving every minute. And we have our key player. I didn't put it on here. I forgot to put the 20th on here. We have our honoree selected. It's John Edgar Weidman from Pittsburgh, fantastic author. And we are planning that for late October, virtual. And then we are planning also a program on May 20th. It's, it's a chat and I'm sorry, yes, you say it, Ellen.
Yes, and 3 stories he's published, 3 of Fitzgerald's stories gathered together, but he's a really important scholar on Fitzgerald. So it'll be the enticement to come to the rest. And Nicole, the whole conference, the theme of it is, are all stories true? Which is relevant to your work and my question.
Yeah. So I recommend, if you're interested in the Fitzgerald Festival, you can either contact myself or you can go right to our website. It's looking pretty good. It's mostly updated. This is a conference that is run mostly by volunteers, 99% volunteers. So if you have any energy to support us as a volunteer, or you want to come to an event, or you'd like to become a member, it's all good to know.
I don't know if everybody knows that Fitzgerald is buried right up the street on Rockville Pike at the little Catholic church there.
It's our Rockvillian claim to fame, among a few others. So I wanted to bring your attention to 4 other events that Assisting Hands is hosting. And that is May 10th, Yoga for Self-Care, open to everybody, 3 o'clock on Monday. May 14th, What's Your Plan with Steve Lorberbaum, who'll do a similar little interview chat with our wonderful Montgomery County Police Department, who works with Elder Safe and scam prevention. And they talk about what do you do when you wake up and somebody's dead in your home. So all of those pieces are covered. And then May 18th, I run Death Cafe, which is a lovely time to chat about death and dying without religious or grief counseling. It's really about kind of practical things that are going on. And then on the 24th, we are actually co-authoring, or I should say Steve is contributing to a book that David Casco has written called Thriving at Home. And it's all about how we use home care and all the other things that we use to keep ourselves happy and at home. So that's our little infomercial here, our little promo. And I just want to thank everybody for being here today. It's lovely to have good questions and thoughtful ideas. And I look forward to seeing you around at something with Assisting Hands soon. Thank you, Karen, for the thumbs up. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really a pleasure. Lovely
Keep
to see
writing,
you.
keep finding out
Yes.
more. And I'll leave the scene open here for a minute, just so that you guys, if you need to write down or copy and paste the adoptee rights law. She put that in the chat just a second ago. So I'll just give it another minute.
Yeah, that gives you a rundown of, you can look up each state and what the situation is. It's kind of crazy with having 50 different states and 50 different laws.